Thank you. And thanks to the organizers for the invitation. Apologies, I couldn't join you earlier. I was chasing pigs, as I normally tell people that my life is spent chasing animals. So this morning I spent chasing pigs, another epidemic. If you can go to the next slide, please. So my presentation will basically focus on the legislation that governs animal disease control in the country, the international standards that we use and try to comply with, the controlled and notifiable diseases list and the measures that apply, how we respond to outbreaks, and a takeaway message for the livestock owners and keepers. And last, the acknowledgements. Disease control in the country is governed by the Animal Diseases Act and the regulations that are promulgated thereunder. And that is an act of parliament. And for some zoonotic diseases that are transmitted through meat, the applicable legislation there would be the Meat Safety Act and the regulations that are promulgated thereunder. So these are the two acts that we basically use for either disease control or for meat safety purposes. Next slide. When it comes to the international standards, South Africa is one of the members of the OIE being the World Organization for Animal Health. It changed officially from the French name to the English name in the last probably 10 years, but we retained the French abbreviation just to be a little difficult and out of the ordinary. And the OIE set standards for controlling animal diseases in individual member countries. They also set standards for trading animals and animal products, what measures needs to be put in place for controlling diseases, as well as measures that needs to be put in place to ensure that the commodities that the consumers eat or that we trade with are safe for such trade. Next slide. When we come to the local situation, I earlier referred to the Animal Diseases Act, and under that act, there is a list of controlled and a list of notifiable diseases that are listed in one of the regulations. The controlled diseases are generally diseases that are very trade sensitive. They require collective effort to control. So individual owners cannot on their own be expected to control and contain those diseases. So that is why it requires collective effort for them to be controlled. And most of them have prescribed control measures as in the regulations, as in table 2 of the regulations. And we try by all means to apply the control measures when necessary, when any of those diseases are reported. We also have a list of notifiable diseases. These diseases are generally preventable, and individual owners, livestock owners, can prevent their introduction into their herds or their flocks, and that is why they are not listed or classified as controlled diseases. And for these diseases, we don't have any prescribed control measures. Any disease that is foreign to the country that has never ever been reported in the Republic is automatically classified as a controlled disease, where the director would have to come up with control measures to contain, eradicate, and manage the disease. The list of controlled and notifiable diseases is available on the DALART website if anybody is interested and would like to see that list. Thank you. So when it comes to outbreak response, we have contingency plans, like any other country and any other outbreak or disease response. There would be contingency plans and contingency measures that are put in place. These are designed, we have a generic control contingency plan that would talk to any outbreak response. But for specific diseases, depending on the epidemiology and the disease that we are looking at, we refine those control measures as and when an outbreak is reported. For example, you wouldn't control, say, foot and mouth disease similar to how you would control avian influenza. So those are influenced by the type of disease, the epidemiological picture that we have on the ground, how the disease is behaving, and manage it as and when the situation changes. For managing diseases that we generally have in the country, we have veterinary procedural notices. These are guidelines that the director has published to try and guide our provincial colleagues in managing diseases and in controlling diseases. So these are also available on the department's website. We also have standard operating procedures, which are similar to the veterinary procedural notices. Now, when it comes to coordination of outbreak response, veterinary services is a provincialized function. So we have to coordinate with the different provincial directors and in particular, the provincial director in whose area an outbreak is reported. We also coordinate with other departments depending on what type of disease we are dealing with. For example, the current situation is that we are dealing with African swine fever, and we end up having a lot of carcasses that needs to be disposed to prevent further spread of disease. So we have to get environmental affairs involved to guide how to dispose of these carcasses. If we are dealing with an outbreak of a zoonotic disease, which was the case in 2016, 2017, when we had a case of avian influenza, the Department of Health was brought on board so that any zoonotic implications could be covered as quickly as possible. Fortunately, that avian influenza that we had was not a zoonosis, so their involvement was fairly limited. We also rely heavily on industries in the sense that government doesn't have animals. Any control measures, any messages that needs to be sent out there needs to be received by industry. Industry has to buy in into our control measures, and therefore they become a very critical part of disease control outbreak response. So they play a very significant role. And also when it comes to consultations with regards to how diseases are better managed, they hold the best information. Remember, we are sitting behind desks. We may not know how to handle a chicken, so they are the best to consult as to how best to approach certain disease control measures. Next slide. I'm almost at the end of the presentation, and I actually only have a simple take-home message to all the livestock keepers, livestock owners, and animal owners. Disease control is a collective effort. Government on our own, we cannot control diseases unless we hold hands with the livestock owners. And there's quite a lot of activity that goes on a farm. And that is why this is a collective effort. As you can see on that picture, the owner has to take care of the animals, has to feed them, make sure that they're happy, well-fed, enough grazing. And we come and make sure that on the health side, that they don't have diseases that we are concerned about. Next slide. I would just like, as my ending remarks, pass my gratitude to all the veterinarians in the country and all the para-veterinarians, men and women out there that actually do the chasing of these pigs that I claim to be chasing, that I'm only chasing on paper, and also all the livestock and animal industries. Thank you very much.